Hello, good evening, and welcome to the latest Honey and Stag event. Our author this evening, you may very well be familiar with her from screen and stage. This is an actress whose work has been very important to me, especially when I was living abroad in Sweden. You may be familiar with a series called The Brothers, an extremely successful and very popular series. So our author this evening is Julia Goodman, author of You Brand, a manual for confidence, published this year by Matador. Julia Goodman, as I said, was an actor, producer and director for 27 years. She enjoyed early stardom in The Brothers and has appeared widely on screen in productions such as The Lotus Eaters, Inspector Morse, Coronation Street, and those glory days. And with fabulous Kate O'Mara, she founded the British Actors Theatre Company and played leading Shakespearean roles all over the world. So it is with great pleasure that we welcome into the studio Julia Goodman, and please, if you have any questions for Julia, please do pop them into the private chat, into the live chat. And remember that this broadcast will also be available on podcast as well tomorrow. So welcome, Julia Goodman.
Thank you very much, Jackie. It's lovely to be here finally.
Wonderful. Thank you. Sometimes the vagaries of technology, they let us down, but we're here. And I just want to say, I'm really grateful for this opportunity to interview you. And in particular, to get to grips with this amazing publication. I felt like you'd written it for me. There were so many messages in there to take away, and I'm still digesting some of them. But I am so sure that that if anybody hasn't yet got hold of a copy, that it will change their lives. I know so often we hear about, this will make everything seem different. This will make you different. But honestly, this book really does do what it says on the label, what it says on the tin. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind setting us off by explaining, how did this come to be, and why is it that, and we can see a beautiful copy there on your shelves, and I know you're going to read to us from this, which is excellent. How did You Brand come into being?
Well, so it's 1989, and we're in the beginning of a major recession. I'd just been playing Lady Macbeth all over Europe and in London. And I came back and something sort of went off in my head, a little light bulb went off in my head, which was, if I can't play these kind of parts, because when you do Shakespeare, it's another level altogether, because it's absolutely fantastic work to do. And at the age that I was then, in my late 30s, I really wanted to be more than ever constantly in the grips of fabulous parts. And of course, as you get older, as a woman in this business, that's when it's happening. And that's what I started to think, do I really want to go on with acting just to be an actress? I'd done a huge amount of stuff, television, films, as you said, theatre, Shakespeare, just playing Lady Macbeth. And I thought, well, I'm not sure that I do. Is there another pond I can go and play in? So I had a thought in the bath. I was in the bath, as you always are. You have good ideas. And I suddenly had this idea that I could take the psychology, the techniques, the philosophy, the discipline of the theatre, and help non-actors perform themselves with more confidence, more awareness, more ability to be themselves. And that's how the word You Brand came about, because it's you, and that's you everywhere. And sometimes we're comfortable in some places and not in others, and therefore have no brand. So that's how You Brand came about. And I started to work with it. And there's many stories about how it started, which I can't go into all now.
Of course, yeah.
I had an idea and I went with it, and the rest is history, as they say.
And I'm just thinking of all that you've developed, you know, since that initial thought of I could do something with this. Am I right in thinking what I've been reading is that you have set up a coaching business? And is that...
Absolutely. I set up it because I knew that I didn't want to just be one a person on their own. My whole family were artists, creators, literally artists, actors, writers, everything. But we also all, right back to my great-great-grandfather, we also ran businesses. So to me, being a creative and running a business was completely normal, but it isn't normal for most people. So I always wanted a group of people. I wanted collaboration. I wanted to feel part of something, and I wanted to be able to take a group of people and do the good that I wanted to do within a team. I've always wanted the team. And so I set up a business when I had nobody, but I still set up a business. I didn't initially.
I think, you know, again, this idea of you having a vision of, you know, if you say, you know, ideas, how they can form, working with a team. And again, in reading the book, one of the key words that comes out is communication. Yeah, it seems to be one of those main strands. And I wonder, you know, to me, and please, you know, correct me, tell me how this is, because from my point...
Jackie, I wouldn't dare correct.
No, but you know, the idea from my point of view, it's always been, you either can communicate or you can't. You know, you either have that gift or you don't. But it seems to me that it's maybe it's something that we can all learn to do well. Would you say that that's so?
Absolutely. Well, I think what it is, and coming from the theatre, as I said, the discipline in the theatre is that you learn the craft of interpretation, because actors are interpretive artists. They're not original artists, they're interpretive artists. And the job we have to do is to make a character come alive and be authentic in a way that has real integrity and belief, and that we trust, because we have to believe in that character. And great actors mostly, well, not entirely, but they use an awful lot of themselves to inform the part, which means that it is part of you. But non-actors don't do that. So ordinary people like yourself, when I say ordinary, I mean non-actors, I thought suddenly I can teach people the craft, not the talent, but the craft of how you perform yourself, and then be able to take that in any situation that you're in and stay rooted in yourself and who you are, but also allow your personality and your presence to be there, because we all have it. We are all unique. You're unique. There's no one else like you in the world, Jackie. There's no one like me in the world, thank God. There's no one like anybody we know in the world. We are all unique. And that uniqueness is really what travels if we allow it, and if we feel confident enough to land. And that's fun.
So help me on this, because the idea of, you know, the presentation of self, and for those of us that aren't, you know, of the profession, the idea of performing self seems almost like a little bit false. You know, it's like, is this the real me? Who's the real me? How do I identify who is me, and how do I do me, you know, to the world at large? How do you explain that?
That is a common problem, because people, especially the British, you know, we're really quite reserved, and we don't really like to project anything very much unless we're absolutely forced to. Why we become great actors, I think a lot of it. The British have a huge propensity for being in the performing arts, because they're not performing themselves, they're performing other people, but they're using themselves, of course. So basically what it means is that the way you perform yourself, with the emphasis on yourself, obviously, that's the important, authentic bit, is you start to use your vulnerabilities. You start to use what we call disclosure. And when you use disclosure, when you actually share more of yourself, you find more of yourself. So it's almost a therapy in itself, because it's a circular process. So the inside and the outside meet, and then you present that, and that is much more of you. It's more of you with skill, basically. I teach the skill, the craft, and help, and through that, more of you comes through, and gradually you start to see and hear yourself, warts and all, as an okay person, as a great person. But you're not trying to be perfect, and you're not acting. That's a whole different thing. You are yourself, and you're able to land that self and have the presence that comes from that. Because otherwise it's inside, isn't it? We don't see it. We have to see it.
Because I think, again, for many of us, the idea of how do people perceive me and how do I perceive myself? You know, because that it makes me think about our voices as well. You know, when we hear our voices, we hear it through bone, and others hear our voices through the air. So it is a different experience, and very often it's like, who am I projecting? How can I be sure? How do I know who I'm projecting?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the congruency of how we look and sound and how we feel about it can be, there's a huge perception gap, and we all fall into that. So the way I feel about myself and the way other people experience me can be very different. So the first thing we do in the work is bridging that gap. And one of the things that I always ask people to do, and I think I do it in the book, I said, look, next time you're on the phone, which we always are, just look in the mirror and hear what you're saying, hear the tone of your voice, and is it registering and congruent with what you see in the mirror? And very often it isn't, because the words that you're saying and the meaning that's behind them that you want to convey is not showing in your voice or in your face. So what are people getting? What are people getting?
Do you think then, I mean, this is an idea that as we speak, that it's making me think, but the phone analogy there that you've used, thinking of the times that we've lived in, you know, for the last year and a bit, and many of our conversations have moved off phone calls and into screens like this. Do you think that's a way of enabling us to see how others perceive us in an easier way?
I think that the Zoom world that we live in has been, for me, the greatest teacher in the world. Because in the old days, like a year and a half ago, if a client came into the studio and they saw the camera there and so forth, and I would be doing work with them and so forth, and then I get them to stand up first and just speak to the camera for a couple of minutes, and they'd say, oh yes, but you see, normally I wouldn't have to do this. I would be much better because I wouldn't be doing it to a camera. That's stupid. And now I say, and you're always doing it to a camera now, so now you know. And looking, you know, if people hide from it or are scared of it, which I totally understand, you're missing an enormous trick of, actually, I can start coaching myself because I see myself. I see what works. If I'm not lit properly, if I'm not sitting properly, if I'm not listening properly, if I am not interested, I'm not looking in the camera where I should be looking. I'm mostly looking at the camera with you, Jackie. I'm not looking at your face. Because if I look at your face, I'm going to be down there. And then you're not going to get the impact and the feeling of connection from me. When I'm up here and I'm looking at you, you're going to get it. So those simple things we've been teaching from the word go. It's been extraordinary.
I wonder, would you do us the great honour of reading us a first piece from you, Brand?
I would indeed. This is from chapter 3, and it's called You Brand and the Paradox. Looking natural doesn't feel natural, not to start with anyway. And I like the Oscar Wilde quote at the top of this, and I expect you've heard it, some of you. Be yourself, everyone else is taken. Oscar Wilde. You brand is the ability to communicate to other people who you are and what you stand for at all levels with courage and confidence, whatever type of situation you're in. It has two main components: character, what makes you who you are, that's you, and the ability to project and communicate that you, whatever situation you're in. That's brand. You brand. It's being able to appear real, normal, natural, and genuine, warts and all, wherever you are. You don't have to have warts, though, to benefit from this book. The expression, I believe, is attributed to Oliver Cromwell's instruction to the artist, Sir Peter Lely, when he was having his portrait painted. It has come to mean the whole thing, without hiding or embellishing anything. You achieve your you brand by mastering the craft of performing yourself. The craft is based on this paradox, which is this. As I said, in order to appear real, natural, normal, and engaging wherever you go, you need to be able to perform your true self, which of course doesn't feel real or natural, and certainly not normal, at least not to begin with. As we all know to our cost, we don't always feel in control of how we're coming across. The arena or situation we find ourselves in may be making us nervous, anxious, or overexcited. Or we might simply be unaware of the impression we're making on people. Or else we're actually, we're acutely aware, but don't know what to do about it. This is why people often hide their true selves by taking on a protective persona that can act as a buffer to the world. And it's why you so often hear remarks like, I just don't get it. She, he, they are so different when you meet them down the pub. Or if I act somebody else, I do much better. Professor Catherine Loveday, a neuropsychologist at the University of Westminster, says that one of the most stressful things you can do to a human is to ask them to speak or perform in front of a group. It's what we use in labs to make people stress. Professor Loveday found that live performance can produce in musicians levels of the stress hormone cortisol akin to those experienced by a skydiver throwing themselves out of a plane. The effects of performing in front of or amongst people should never be underestimated. But it's not enough just to be able to bridge the perception gap in certain situations and not others. We have to operate and communicate in many different arenas, making friends in the playground or at university, going for our first job, or that big opportunity, auditioning or interviewing, presenting to a small group or a large conference, pitching to a new prospective client on Zoom, selling an idea in the boardroom, leading or being part of a team. The day-to-day interactions with colleagues and friends, mingling and networking with strangers at drinks parties or other social events, those challenging conversations where your anxiety is closing you down and you just want to hide. The old mantra, people by people, suggests that if we are to be bought or believed, followed, listened to, or liked, we need to perform consistently across all these different situations. If we appear natural, confident, and engaging in one, yet indifferent, cold, and aloof in another, then we will confuse people. They won't know quite what they're buying. So we probably won't close the deal, develop the relationship, be heard at senior level, or to be remembered as we would wish, if we're remembered at all. I often ask my clients whether they think they pass what I call the Marmite test. What are the qualities of this iconic brand? Well, it is always recognizable. You have a relationship with it. It is consistent. It is reliable. It is special, unique. It is trustworthy. It is authentic, always. That last point, authenticity, is very important. Marmite's famous slogan, you either love it or hate it, applies to people too. I've been likened to Marmite myself, and is something to bear in mind when working on your you brand. The simple fact for any brand is that some people like it and some do not. The worst thing a brand can do is to compromise its values in an attempt to broaden its appeal. It will just lose the things that make it special and risk alienating everyone. A good example of an established brand losing sight of its core market is that of one of Britain's longest established high street retailers. You probably know who I mean. It's where my mum used to go to buy high quality, reasonably priced clothes. The shop was always consistent and reliable. An instinctive choice for staple items like blouses, skirts, cardigans, and jumpers. But then they tried to reinvent themselves. And it seems to me they've been struggling with an identity crisis ever since. They don't know who they are anymore. Are they a cool brand, a traditional brand, young or old? In the process, they've alienated their core market and have never really regained it. My mum certainly never forgave them. It's the same with people. A personal brand is bound by many of the same rules as a commercial brand, and authenticity, being true to yourself, is key. If we over-accommodate to fit in, to be accepted and liked, if in other words we feel it's not okay to be me, it won't have the desired outcome. And we often don't realize this till it's too late. And we wish we'd been more assertive and true to ourselves. As you read on, I hope you'll see this book as a celebration of your uniqueness, that there's no one else like you in the world. In fact, paradoxically, our uniqueness is the one thing we all have in common. As Bill Bryson observes in his fascinating book, The Body, A Guide for Occupants, we are all very different, despite being genetically almost identical. Each person's DNA differs from another's in 3 to 4 million places. This is proportionally tiny, about 0.1% of our DNA, but enough to make a huge difference between us. Equally, if we are inconsistent in the way we come over in different situations, not out of any conscious choice, but because of unawareness or the way we feel in the moment, this too can compromise our brand. People will just find us confusing. They won't ever be sure what's real and what isn't. This takes away from our likability and influence. If people's feeling about us keeps changing because we are never the same person twice, their relationship with us will be undermined because its whole identity will become flaky. Here's a little something to enjoy. And the moral of that is, be what you would seem to be, or if you'd like it put more simply, never imagine yourself not to be otherwise than what it might appear to others that what you were or might have been was not otherwise than what you had been would have appeared to them to be otherwise. Lewis Carroll, Through the Looking Glass.
Oh, thank you so much for that reading. Absolutely wonderful. I mean, just wonderful to listen to you read, but those words, I mean, so powerful, because I think it's something that so many of us struggle with. The idea that in order for us to be successful, to succeed, we need to be popular, we need people to like us, we need to do the eternal people pleasing. And you know, as I've been reading, and I wanted to ask you, how do we get to that point? I really love the Marmite, you know, idea of not everybody's going to like you, and that's okay. How do we get to that point, though, of saying, I'm okay with this. I'm okay if people don't like my brand?
Well, life, age, all those things that you get to when you suddenly think, you know, I don't care a damn what people think about me. Well, of course I do, and you do. We all do. Of course we do. But I think you learn to, through the work, I absolutely know that it changes people's life because they see and feel and understand who they are through doing the work, through articulating and expressing themselves. And that's the important thing, that great communicators express and control emotion at the same time. Think about that. Express and control emotion at the same time, meaning they can use their feelings, use who they are, and make sure that it's landing in an appropriate way and that people are hearing it in the way that they want to, that's best for them. And another lovely phrase, which I was given by an American psychologist that I was doing some work with, and it's something she brought out, which was the seven traits of influence. And one of them was, you are only as influential as how people feel about themselves in your presence. Think about it. Ooh, that's powerful.
It really is. It's like, I know we're meant to be having a conversation, but I'm thinking, just a minute while I digest this. But I can go back and watch again, which is good. Now,
yeah.
A thing that we do, thanks. Angie Plant's with us, and she's saying this makes so much sense. Angie, I hope you're enjoying this session with us. And again, anybody else who's watching, do please feel free to comment or ask questions. On Honey and Stag, what we like to do is for our guests to bring on guests of their own as well, because we, for the conversation, just to bring different angles. And I believe there's somebody that you would like to join the conversation. Julia, who is that? Who have you got with you this evening?
I have got the lovely Elizabeth Moynihan, who is from Dublin and London, depending on where she's working at the time. She is a woman that I have got to know not that long ago, but we seem to have a lot of things in common. One of the main ones is diversity and inclusion, which she's been doing a lot of work on. She's an author and a writer, and she's got 2 plays coming up, one in Oxford and one in Dublin very soon, which I think you'll have the links on. And she's a very passionate supporter of women and of the whole. She gets incensed by bad inclusion and diversity. Just don't get her started. She's worked with me on certain things, and she's an actor as well. So that's who I want to bring on.
Wonderful. In which case, Julia, if you'll excuse me, and I shall leave you and Elizabeth to have that conversation.
Hi, Julia.
Hiya.
Oh, that was incredible hearing you perform from your book.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Yes, except the light wasn't great, and I was kind of stumbling slightly over my own words,
No.
but there you go.
Au contraire, you were fabulous. And you were talking about perfectionism, and that sort of gets in our way. You were authentically you, and that really shines through, and it's been a huge influence on me in my life in the short time I know you. And I feel a little bit emotional tonight actually hearing you speak, because I was just thinking while you were speaking about what a huge change has happened in my life as a result of knowing you and being around you and your method of working and reading your book. So, do you remember how we met?
Well, I think you were referred to me. Yeah. We went out and did a little sort of tour 2 days before Brexit happened. We were over there, and we didn't know it was going to go the way it did, of course, obviously. And we met through a friend that you'd been working with, I think.
Yes. And remember, I arrived late for the meeting, like a drowned rat, because the parade, the St. Patrick's Day parade was on.
Oh yes, and we met in the Clarence Hotel,
The
didn't we?
Clarence Hotel in Dublin, and I was mortified because I'd heard so much about you, and I'd been trying to pin down a meeting with you. I really wanted to meet you and perhaps work with you in the future, but I just wanted to meet you because I'd heard such amazing things about you. And I couldn't get through the Patrick's Day parade. I had to wait for it to pass, and the rain was pouring down on everybody. So I arrived in such a state, and I mean, I wasn't really giving a very good impression of myself and how I presented physically. So that was my...
That was your introduction, but I have to say, I was so impressed by the fact that you got through this thing in the pouring rain. You were absolutely determined to get to the hotel. You sat there having cup of tea after cup of tea, thinking, "Well, I wonder if she's going to get it. Do you think she's going to get it?"
No.
I don't know, but you did, and that's more impressive to me than most things. You know, when people can sit.
Yeah.
And they
Julia, I just want to say to you, your book blew me away, and that's not me trying to suck up to you. You know that I always speak from the heart, and I always speak truthfully. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't say it. And I was nervous reading it because I wanted to love it, but there's always that bit of apprehension that, you know, somebody who is a mentor in your life and a great influence in your life, you're hoping their book will be good. But if it's not, what do you do? And I remember I just read the introduction, and I think I sent a voice note just after the introduction, because I'd never read an introduction as engaging as that before. What encouraged you to write the introduction that was so authentic and so, at times, you know, really vulnerable? What made you do that?
I thought, because if I'm going to truly deliver something that people will, from the first moment they pick up the book, know that it's coming from a real person, a person who's, and I won't use the very naughty swear word that I might have used if I was in the studio with you alone, made quite a mess of her life in various different ways and in various different stages. If I didn't come clean on that as to who I was and why I was there and so forth, well, there'd be no story really, there'd be no adventure, and it wouldn't really ring true. It had to be absolutely true. And there's more I could have done and there's more I could have said, but I knew that that was what I had to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to share something with you following on from that. And that is, for years, I didn't perform myself authentically. And that's why I became an actor, because I thought I could hide behind character. And, you know, listening to you tonight and you discussing how essential it is to be your authentic and vulnerable self, I was just thinking to myself, I wish that I'd met you years ago, that I might have been a very different actor, a different human being walking around in the world. And with the benefit of age, which you touched on with Jackie, that you get to a stage where you don't want to keep that facade up anymore, not as an actor, not as a real person, because you know it doesn't work. And the Marmite metaphor that you used really resonated with me, because a lot of the time I didn't win people over. I didn't have that likability factor because I was pretending. I was giving people a version of myself. Did you ever do that in your life?
Oh, I think so. I think people, I was always very surprised by talking to school friends, you know, that I met years later. And they would say to me, "Oh, but you're always so confident. I just so wanted to be you because you're always so confident." And I used to think, who is this person they're talking about?
Yeah.
I don't remember that person. I don't recognize. I only recognize that person that used to go around saying, no, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care if they don't like me. I just don't care. When I did care hugely, of course.
Yeah.
I was always feeling in there that I wasn't liked. Didn't fit in. I had 7 moves before I was 7. So obviously I had to acquire a way of getting in and being accepted and so forth. And I never felt I did. And I've always said to the children, if you're an outlier, which I was, which I didn't realize, but I was, eventually it gives you strength, because you have to accept that you are not the same as other people for whatever reason. And I wasn't, because I just was who I was always.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that now, but I was not that person when I was younger. Like you, I was displaced. I had dyspraxia. I know you shared with me that you were dyslexic. And I can't believe, with my neuroatypical challenges, that I've been able to write a book, write 14 stage plays. Did you ever think when you were younger that you would write a book?
No, never.
Isn't that incredible?
No, I was always able to express out. That wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
So sitting down and processing down, which is where my problem is, processing. So I'm not back to front words or things like that, but I am. I have a processing problem. Not in a million years did I think I'd be able to do that, and it took me 7 years
to actually. Yeah. Can I just say that this is a book that should be read by everybody. This is not just a manual for confidence. I think it's a manual for life, and it's good for your mental health, this book, because that was my first response to it. I was like, everybody has to read this book. Writers have to read this book, because you talk about the story wheel, and that terrified me when I started working with you first, because I had to talk about my story. I had to lead in the morning with morning news. You know, you do the morning news and you have to talk about something that happened to you on the way. And it can be something mundane, but it's all about how you perform it.
Yeah.
And I was so terrified talking about myself, not being able to hide behind a costume and a character or words on a page that I'd have written, that it really scared me. But you enabled me to be comfortable doing that. And that's why I think this book is so important for everybody post-COVID, because we have lost the ability, in a way, because we've been so isolated and we're not connecting. We're connecting through a screen, yes.
Absolutely.
But we're not connecting in the way that we used to. That I feel that this can really help us to go back to, as you said before, when things were back in the good old days, when things were.
When we were, and thank you very much for that, Elizabeth. That was beautiful. Thank you. I'm very pleased and happy, because I do think one of the things that I've always been, as you know, passionate about is having more women being able to speak up and have presence.
Yeah.
Stand up and be themselves. And then we need more of them, so much more in business, in every other way, because I think I was reading something in HBR magazine the other day, which was fascinating. Two quotes from this woman who was writing this article. One was, it needs at least 2 women on a board before there's any change of dynamic, at least 2.
Yes.
If women on the boards of banks, there is less fraud.
Wow. That's incredible. I didn't know that statistic. I didn't.
You know, and we've always known this is a no-brainer. It's not that you want only women or only men or anybody in between. It's not that. You just need a diverse collection of people with differing perspectives that all have different emotional kind of a way of seeing the world, so that you collectively get to this fantastic understanding about something rather than in one place. And women bring a huge amount of that to it. It's mad, not more.
Well, what's so powerful for me, watching the work you do in the financial sector with men who have been conditioned to be really shut down, with women who've been shamed for not being shut down, for not, for being vulnerable, for being emotional, as they, I know that's a trigger word, but for women in the workplace, but, and shamed for that. It's powerful watching you encourage men in the workplace and women in the workplace to be more vulnerable and to be more themselves. That's where the power is.
That's where the power is, because we don't accept ourselves. We're mostly ashamed of ourselves all the time. We should be more like that. You know, we have all these injunctions that we get from authority or our parents or whatever, for all the best will in the world. But nevertheless, we feel we should be better, right? And I remember training one man who was the head of a big team in a company, BP. I'm sure I can use the word BP.
Yeah.
And engineers all focused on very male pursuits, etc., and thinking and cognitive thinking. Very engineers are always very particular, like mathematicians and scientists. And at the end of it, I took him out to lunch and said, "How's it going?" And he looked at me and he said, "You gave me an emotional language, and I'm forever grateful."
Wow.
And I said, "But you always had that emotion in there." He said, "Yes, but I didn't have the language. I didn't have the understanding." And if I can help men have more of an emotional language, or women, or anybody, that's where it starts. When you can actually feel able to talk about things in a way that lands with people, that makes people feel connected to them. But you have to be able to do it reasonably confidently. That's the point. And it's why people don't do it, because they don't feel confident about doing it. And once they do, it changes everything.
Yeah, I think the only way men have been given license to show emotion at work is through anger. You know, the shouting on the you know, on the floor, on the trading floor, shouting in meetings, being quite aggressive. And then we women have been encouraged to emulate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in my diversity and inclusion, sorry, go ahead.
It's the only way you fit in.
Yes.
It's the only way you're going to be accepted if you behave like that. That's what people think. It's not true, of course, but that is, yeah.
And dressing like men and behaving like men, we've been encouraged to do that, especially in the financial sector. And with the data that's coming through and the feedback that's coming through that I would have been privy to when I was doing my diversity and inclusion training programs, is that women are tired of that. They don't want to do that anymore. They want to embrace their womanhood, their gender, and they want to be authentically themselves in the workplace. And I think people are listening. They're listening.
They're beginning to. But also, I know that a few years ago there was a. I understood very clearly why women didn't want to go into the higher echelons of, in the corporate world, because it was toxic. And why would you want to be in that toxic place?
They're self-selecting.
Yeah, unless they were going to be more frightening or more male or more aggressive or more anything, everything than the men themselves. And you do get those women. And they maybe are less now, but I also would see that it was women who kept women out, not men, women.
Yeah. They say that men in the workplace have built the glass ceiling and women keep it intact. Out of fear, we've been cultured to be in competition with each other instead of supporting each other. And I think that's why your work is so important, because it's helping us women to actually, not just stand up for ourselves, but for others. And here's an interesting statistic that I'm sure you know already, that women are too afraid to apply for middle management, let alone upper management roles. They're not even applying for middle management. because of the culture, because of the toxic culture.
You would want to be in that culture. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's well, we could go on for hours.
We could,
But
couldn't we, Julia? Thank you so much. This should be on the curriculum. Look how I've marked it. I've even put family photographs in, pencils.
Well, it is the book for life. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's gradually getting some momentum, which is lovely. And things like this are fabulous, you know. And I think it's one of those things that people like yourself will say, right, I've now got this book. I'm going to be taking it with me, taking it around in my life. And that's what I want for people. That's all I want, is people to have it and for them to feel that they can
dip in and out,
grow.
you know?
Yeah, dip in and out, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's lots of lovely exercises in there which you can do, which are quite fun. And
yes, and I love the, you know, these boxes at the summary at the end of each chapter. Can you see it there? Whoops, this way.
Yeah.
In grey, and it summarizes every chapter. And that's so handy, because it's, you know, sometimes, well, maybe it's just me, but I forget what I've read, you know? And then, so the summary of the chapter refreshes me before I move on to the next chapter.
The next one. Yeah,
so I think that's brilliant. Yeah,
and I love the colours, don't you? I love all the colours.
Oh, yes.
Designers did that, which is brilliant.
And it's so pertinent for this month.
And this is my favourite drawing. This is my favourite.
Oh, I love that drawing too. I love all those little, because it's witty, you know.
Yeah.
And this little man here.
Yeah, I know. I think that's based on the person who drew it.
Oh, really? Yeah. I wonder who that is.
Yeah, I think who that is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
Hello. Can I just say it's been an absolute joy. I feel quite guilty. I've just been, you know, just luxuriating in this conversation. Thank you both so much. Elizabeth, yeah, I just to echo some of the points that you made, you know, that this book should be on the curriculum.
Yeah.
And especially now that, you know, we've, you know, I think even the strongest person has struggled over the last, you know, 18 months. This thing of finding self again and being able to project self and to communicate with others, it's vital. It you know, it ticks so many boxes.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Yeah.
Because we've lost our faith. You know, we lost our faith, I think, in the world ever getting back to normal. Is, I hate to use that word, but you know, back to the good old days. But hearing Julia, it would put you, it reignites your faith, and a book like this reignites your faith.
It does, and I think the other thing it does as well is to say there is a way forward. You know, I'm just thinking about diversity and hearing other people's voices, and not having to do in the ways that seem to be the traditional ways of doing things. And I think, you know, it's a book, you know, it's a great manual for that as well, not just for confidence, but also for living differently. And maybe, you know, maybe humanity has been given this opportunity, and I know people have had some terrible experiences, but maybe out of this we can learn to do differently. You know, and
Jackie, you mentioned something before, earlier when we were chatting to Julia. You talked about people pleasing, and that really resonated with me. I was an arch people pleaser, and I haven't fully recovered from my people pleasing, I have to say, but I'm much more, as a result of the work with Julia, I'm much braver to performing myself rather than a version of myself. And it's okay if you don't like me, that's okay. You know, somebody else will, and I have to trust that I'm enough and that I'm okay.
Yeah. And I think, you know, is it ourselves that are the biggest hurdle?
That's a question for Julia, for sure. Yeah.
But And Elizabeth, thank you so much for agreeing to be on.
My honour and pleasure.
Evening. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. So, Julia, now, you talked before with Elizabeth, there was the talk about labelling.
Yeah.
And it made me think about identity and how we, we wish to form our identities and we wish to be known. But how do we resist those pernicious labels? And it's often spoke about, the difference between men and women in the workplace, that men can be assertive where women are just hysterical and bossy. And, how do we resist that?
How do we resist it? Okay, well, we learn to be in a connected adult place, which is knowing and understanding that you're only 50% responsible for the outcome of any communication, anything that goes on. You're only 50% responsible because the other person is 50% responsible. And learning to be able to be assertive, which is the basis of the adult process, which is from transactional analysis, which is all in the book, of course, as you know. It's about being able to say, this is how I see things, because that's your view and that is your ownership. This is how I feel, because only you can tell that, and that's your ownership, how you feel. And this is what I want to happen. Now, once you've done that, you then help, if you know how to do this, and this is what's also in the book, people to come into the adult place with you eventually. They may throw their toys out of the pram initially, but you stay in that place. Once you've decided and worked out where you are and what's right for you, you're able to assert yourself by doing that. And then you are safe. And then helping people into that adult place with you, eventually, you need them to be able to say, well, this is how I see it, this is how I feel, and this is what I'd like to happen. And then you can negotiate. And the negotiation is either a yes, a no, or a compromise. But basically what happens then is there's no what is called in the business blood on the carpet. You haven't hurt anybody. You're yourself. You've been respected and valued for your view. And you won't always get what you want, because that's the important thing about adults, isn't it? It's about being mature enough to be able to walk away and not get what you want. And all the other things that we do around being adult are manipulation. We're trying to get what we want. And that is not a safe place to be in.
That is
a win-win place.
Yeah. Wow. Yet another thing to hold on to and process. Now, I'm aware of the time, and you're there before I even ask you. So you said you'd be so good as to do a second reading. So please take us there.
So this is how are people labelled, right? So some women may be flirtatious or girly, while others are aggressive, and those are all in quote marks. In brackets, if we dare to stand up to a man who is claiming our idea as his own in a meeting, for example, bossy, ball breaker, or man in a skirt, if we show strong leadership, or ice maiden, if we retain our composure and don't join in with an offensive joke. Labeling like this is pernicious, often deliberately hurtful, belittling, and bullying, and is used to keep people in their place. Labeling is almost invariably destructive. Moving beyond my own feelings on the subject, which you can probably tell are strong, and the individual psychological harm it does, labeling, and the scarcity of women at senior levels in corporate and public life that it helps perpetuate, has a massive negative impact on our economy, our politics, and our social and psychological welfare generally, can't read my full stops. There is a huge amount of evidence for this. Just Google business case for diversity for some examples. Labeling is part of an environment and culture that prevent women from being and expressing who they truly are, and that exclude their perspectives, their logic, feelings, and intuition from shaping the world. It has made many women frightened of their own power and insecure about expressing it in a natural and authentic way. An insecurity that is perpetuated partly because of a lack of senior women role models. If we're not reflected in an organization, we feel excluded from it. It's one thing for companies and organizations to claim they have a diverse workforce in terms of gender, age, ethnicity, religion, and so on. But unless people feel genuinely included in the culture, then nothing changes, and the bottom line of the business or the effectiveness of the organization are adversely affected. Having more women in senior roles will allow people, men and women alike, to be more themselves and help create a more authentic culture where people will want to stay. Although society still operates through a predominantly male lens, I am optimistic that this situation can and will change. For example, the current Me Too, Time's Up campaigns are moving things in a positive direction. All women individually have the ability to overcome labels and bring their true selves to work. Think about the TA house, which is in the book and you haven't had yet. All the labels and the behavior they describe map directly onto negative ego states. Either parent or child, ball breaker, man in skirt or ice maiden are negative, critical parent. Girly or flirty are negative, adapted child. Mummy or nanny are negative, nurturing parent, and so on. To break out of these states and to destroy the labels, all you need to do is breathe, shape the mindset, turn on the performance energy, and get into adult. It's simple when you know how. A little story. One of my star women in the first Women in Business pilot group was a top cop from the Met, who I'd met at an event for senior policewomen at Scotland Yard. A colleague and I delivered a challenging presentation around the TA model, transaction analysis that is, and the basic premise of our work, how people's perception of you is influenced by how you look and sound, or how people see you and how people hear you. The audience was made up of some very intimidating looking women who I felt were sitting there thinking, "Ugh, what the hell is all this fluffy stuff?" It was one of the most daunting sessions I've ever done. Towards the end, Linda LaPlante, an old friend, she's the writer, we had worked as actors together, joined the group and with great surprise asked me, "What are you doing here?" She was at that time researching her TV series Prime Suspect, and at drinks afterwards, she introduced me to the senior police officer who was liaising with her on the show. The woman in question had reached a point in her life when she was a bit cynical and feeling that it was time to retire. Her commander took me aside and said, "We really don't want her to go. Is there anything you can do?" We ended up talking, the woman and I eventually threw down the gauntlet and challenged her to come on this new course to help pilot it. She accepted. Her brilliance and her ability were not in question, but her confidence and authenticity as a senior policewoman were being challenged by how she felt about herself. And this translated into how she looked and sounded. She felt she couldn't go any further up the ladder, so was retreating. Her demeanor was hunched and introverted and quite scary. Her body language and the tonal quality of her voice, all on one note, didn't demonstrate authority or real leadership. She needed to grow into the very senior leadership role she wanted, but wasn't sure she could go for. She came to me for a number of sessions where we worked on her physical presence, her centered adult connection, and showing the strong woman that she was. She went on to become Deputy Assistant Commissioner of the Met. I feel very proud of her. Once you've got a real sense of how to use TA in the moment with no blood on the carpet, no misunderstanding, resentment, or damaged feelings, you will be well on the way to your you brand. Using TA and performing yourself through it takes consistent effort and practice. At least that's been my experience. But boy, is it worth it. In challenging situations, it can be a lifesaver. Learning about how we work and how we impact on the world is one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves. Self-awareness is the key to a happy and fulfilled life. It's a source of lasting success, even when you may be feeling less than successful in other, more superficial ways. Okay, there we go.
Julia, I'm lost for words because I'm just so moved by what you've written, and then to hear you deliver those words is truly, truly amazing. I am aware of the time, and so I just really wanted to close by saying I wonder if we might do more sessions together with more questions. I want to go out and champion this book far and wide. So my last question to you is this. I know selling copies of books is very important, but if you could have one wish with this book, what would it be?
My passion for the work from the very early days, and certainly now for the book, and indeed the masterclasses that I've filmed in the lockdown for online, is my way of giving the gift to the world. It's my gift to the world. That's it.
And yeah, and what a beautiful gift it is, because I think the ideas that you bring out, I think they enable us to be better people to ourselves and to each other. So that sense of better communities through better communication.
Absolutely. It's a collaborative process. And if we understand ourselves better, we understand others. And for me, it's never been, funnily enough, apart from being able to put food on the table for my children when I was divorced and had no work, unless it was, in television somewhere, not all the time, was not about the money. Never has been about the money, not really. And it's still not about the money. I want the book and all the work to go to people. That's all I care about. Because I can see how amazing it is when people come out and they blossom. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Julia, it has been a privilege and a pleasure to be in conversation with you and with Elizabeth as well this evening. I wish you every success with this book, and I hope we can join in conversation again very soon.
We could do lots more. I'd love to do that. It'd be great fun. And thank you, Jackie, and thank Kelly for bringing this about. It's been delightful. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
A total pleasure. Thank you, and good night, Julia. Thank you, everyone, for joining this evening, and for those who watch again later, and it will be available, as we said, on podcast. And I thank Kelly Lacey for bringing such amazing authors for us to be in conversation with. But it just remains for me to say good night and goodbye, and look forward to another session on the Stag very soon. Goodbye.